Welcome to Inclusion Podcast. I'm Chantal Doucette.
I'm Paul Anderson-Walsh.
And we're really looking forward to this one. We've got Carrie and David Grant, who are broadcasters, authors, in the leadership space. I mean, they do a gazillion things, right?
They do a gazillion things, and not only that, they're also family, so that's fabulous, right?
Yeah, indeed. So looking forward to you getting into this conversation, and let us know how you receive it on the other side.
Inclusion.
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 Inclusion. Inclusion.
Inclusion podcast by the Centre for Inclusive Leadership.
Carrie and David Grant, it is so good to have you on.
How good is this?
So lovely to be
It's
on.
the only way we can get to have a coffee with you.
In real life, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just so thrilled to have you on, honestly, and just so excited to have this discussion with you. I was going through, because obviously we've known each other for so long, and I was like, okay, so what's the CV of, David and Carrie? I was like, BAFTA award-winning broadcasters, vocal coaches, leadership coaches, campaigners. I was like, yeah, done quite a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a lot. An award-winning Mobos, amazing. And the work that you do, which is the conversation we'll get into about, autism awareness, which is great. And then you've got your books. I know you've got a book coming out on the 11th of May, which is a very modern family. So we might get into some of that as well. But just really thrilled to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thanks
It's
for having
wonderful
us.
to be here. Thank you.
And also it's nice little role reversal because normally I'm on...
Yeah, I'm normally interviewing you. What's going on?
It's been a change.
I'm just waiting for the questions now. It's great.
Let's jump in and ask the first one. What does inclusion mean to you?
Wow. There's no such thing as equality of ability because we are all different. But inclusion means to me that whatever your ability, you're not denied the opportunity to fully express it. Whatever your talent or your outlook, you're not denied the ability to grow to your full height in it. You're not just allowed to be in the room where it happens. You're given a seat at the table. You're not just permitted to listen to the music. There's a space for you on the dance floor. That whoever you are and whatever you are, there's a recognition that your uniqueness should be not just recognized and celebrated, but actually that you bring something that nobody else brings. Inclusion means the cake has all the ingredients.
Wow, that's incredible. I think I heard you say it this week, and you put me in mind of something that Paul said, which was that inclusion is about belonging on your own terms.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't have to be like you to be permitted to express my truth and my opinion. I don't have to be like you in order to be embraced.
Yeah.
I can be like me and celebrate you being like you.
It's lovely.
I think that word belonging is really fundamental to inclusion. I think we have a desire, most people probably have a desire to belong, to feel like you belong to some other people. And I think that historically we think of belonging as belonging to people that look like me and sound like me and act like me. Whereas true belonging means that there's enough space in this world for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So why are we battling over space? There's enough.
Yeah.
There's enough for us all to belong. So for me, I think what you said was great, but I think that it's a feeling. Inclusion is a feeling. And that feeling is, I belong
Wow.
here.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
That's incredible.
It's great, isn't it? Because we make a big point out of that, Carrie. One of the things that we talk about, and I love the way you positioned it, David, because for us, we think about diversity as difference. So if you like, diversity is a fact. And why is it a fact? It's a fact because we're all unique.
Yes.
If we all turn our hands over and we'll see none of us have got the same fingerprints, right? Because we are all unique human beings. And if you say that diversity is a fact, then for us, inclusion is a feeling. And then the issue is, how am I made to feel about my facts? So if I show up as, do you know what I mean, as who I am, can I belong with this set of facts? Or do I have to potentially do some work around hiding, switching, covering, decoding those facts? Because I want, to your point, I want to belong with you. And what I'm sensing is that belonging given the facts that make me who I am. And I know we want to talk about intersectionality because none of us are a single fact, right?
Yeah, I think it's also about the fact that we are different to and different from our two different states. You know, we're different to one another is one thing, but being different from suggests that there is an ideal, and there are certain people who are different from that ideal.
Yes.
And then society has set up what it sees as that ideal, and that I would like to see that broken down so that we're just different to each other. Because once we set up what the ideal is, you know, normal is an ideology in itself. Let's not pretend that it's not. Someone said, this is normal, this is the natural. And we all kind of went, okay, then all right. And then how do I match up to that? Oh, I'm very different from that. Or I'm not very different. Great. Oh, I can fit. That's great. You know, however we stand on a spectrum around that. But it's not about being different from. Like, why is this normal ideology? Why does it have to sit there? Why can't normal be just difference in everybody being different? Then why can't that be normal?
You're absolutely right, because when one says normal, what people are really saying is familiar. You know, if I get on my trap and I've got a pony and somebody passes in the car and I've never been in a car, normal is a horse and cart because it's familiar. You know, and the normal changes all the time to the point where ultimately you realise there is no normal, because what's normal to one person is completely abnormal to another. So rather than saying, look, this is the standard, this is the line, and anything that is not normal is always perceived to be less than, why don't we just say, what are you? What are you?
Or who are you?
Who are you? You know, and let's explore that rather than saying, well, you know, you have to shift it a little bit to the left or to the right in order to be accepted.
Let me ask you something, because I think that's really interesting. And if belonging, and I think it's a primal need, actually, I don't think anybody escapes the need to belong. That need for social belonging is very profound, right? So if I want to belong with and belong with you, but I sense that your proposition is I'm different from you. If I'm different from you, but I want to belong with you, what do I do?
I think that you have to get over whatever stands in the way from you feeling that belonging. You know, in a very simple way, when David and I met, we look very different. And so David didn't have to overcome anything, because David has grown up pretty much always being the only black person in the room, whereas I've grown up with the privilege of always just being amongst people who are white, and that's a white thing, and with the dominant, it's the normal, it's the natural, it's the majority. So it's me that needed to do the changing. So I think it's confronting our own prejudices, confronting our own feelings about difference. I think once you're on that journey, it's so exciting, because you realise, wow, the world is so broad and so incredible and so diverse, and wow, isn't diversity incredible?
So,
you know, that to me is an adventure that I'm still learning every day of my life. There's a new person. Everyone is different anyway, so that every person you meet is like, what are you bringing? Wow, you got this is what you bring. For me, that's something that doesn't feel threatening. It's never been threatening. It's exciting and wonderful and something to explore.
I agree with you, but again, I'm wanting to go after you on this one a bit, because I think this to me is fascinating, because the thing is that what I'm seeing is the notion of saying it's all right if you're different from, as long as eventually you become the same as.
Right.
So what you end up with is, you don't end up with me holding my difference. What you end up saying is, actually, I have to homogenize my difference if I want to belong here. So in corporate life, I think this is really complicated, because when you go into the corporate space, and you can pick any aspect of diversity you want, let's say gender, let's say race, doesn't matter what it is, I think so many people who present differently from the belonging narrative in the group, what they end up doing is they end up kind of imitating the group. So rather than literally being themselves in the group, they morph into the group itself. It's
assimilation, isn't it?
It's assimilation, that's exactly right. And I worry about that, right? Because I think to myself, the thing that I want to hold on to more than anything else, because I think this is the only question there is to answer, is who am I when I stop being who I think I am? Because I think so many of us are caught in this desperate anguish and this desperate anxiety between the person we pretend to be and the person we know ourselves to be. And I think that becomes so complicated in corporate life. And it's just exhausting, isn't it, when you're playing that game out?
I think in corporate life, the group dynamic, or the identity of the group, can happen in one of two ways. I think it's either imposed, even if it's imposed benignly from the top. This is who we are. These are our values. This is what you are. This is what you now belong to.
Yes.
Or if it's organic, it actually evolves as a result of who is in the group. So you leave a company and go back 5 years later and it's completely changed because the personnel has changed. If it's flat into it hierarchically and people are allowed to express themselves, then the group becomes whatever you are and people take their place in it. Now, where the dichotomy that you alluded to just a moment ago of who are you when you stop being who you think you are can happen even in that environment, is that people recognize this element of who I am is what's most valued. This element of who I am is what is most highly regarded. It's what people want. And so instinctively within ourselves, we say, okay, this bit isn't for the workplace. This bit of me isn't for the workplace.
So we edit
this bit of me, we edit. And sometimes we edit for safety because we feel that if people really knew me, perhaps they would reject me. So it's the personal fear of rejection. But sometimes we edit because we simply don't trust that actually who we fully are will be acceptable in that environment. And so even in that flat hierarchy, we are who we are, but not all of who
So you're saying we're an edited version?
We're an edited, It's like, it's the edited version. It's the movie when you see it on the plane and they say we've edited it because of the length of the flight, and not, rather than the director's cut's twice as long. We do that with our own lives.
See that? Go on, Chantal, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll say it's very interesting because we talk about this quite a lot, and we find this in organisations that, and this will actually resonate with you quite a lot, I think, that the editing process, people will change the way they dress, they will conceal the fact that they're parents. If it's, I'm a mother, I don't want to be seen as a mother because I won't be invited to overseas projects. I change the way that I dress because everyone's wearing, I don't know, Patagonia or whatever it is, and that seems to be the thing that everyone's wearing, the dominant. But also, I've been talking to different dialect voice coaches that have said, oh, actually, it's really interesting. We've noticed a new trend, and we've got this new term. It's called accent reduction. And it's so counter to what they're used to doing because, as you know, they'll teach an actor who's English to do an American accent really cleanly. But what's happening is they're getting people from the corporate world saying, oh, I've got an accent that's from the Midlands, or, I'm Spanish and I need to clean my accent. And they're going, that's not even a thing. What do you mean? Like, your accent's your accent. So it's this whole, how do we neutralise the accent? And now they have this term called accent reduction.
Wow.
Yeah, which is, I guess, no different from received pronunciation.
Precisely.
When everyone spoke like that, and that's just the way that it was for people that were on television, radio, and then also in business. That's because everyone had to speak like that because a posh accent came with, you must be intelligent if you're posh.
That's it.
So those two things were held together. But for me, I think it's, what I'm hearing is just this sense of not being able to show up as yourself. And that worries me, because if you can't show up as yourself, you are never going to fully embody what you're meant to be in your work. So that means that you've got reduced assets in your staff. If you're talking about teams of people, they are going to be reduced by not being able to show up as themselves. Yeah. So actually, it's counter. If you want to just go on a business level and be hardline about it, you're not going to get the best out of people if they can't show up as themselves. When people show up as themselves, their assets flow, and when they're in that sweet spot, they're going to give you the best performance and the best relationships and the best everything because they're able to be themselves. Not only that, but one thing we don't talk about nearly enough is how to navigate success. And if you're showing up as yourself, it's much easier to navigate success because you're sitting in your feelings, you're sitting in with where you're at. And so the journey of success means that because if you're already hiding part of who you are, or you're trying to be something else, the pressure that comes with success causes explosions. And then we see all of the fallout of that, don't we, in our industry, in music and theatre and the arts, all the fallout. And we see that in business as well. You know, the person that's actually leading a total double life, by the time they get their success, it's like it's become so split. There's a cold kind of schism there, where you're not, because you're not showing up as yourself, you've gone off at this tangent and you're way over here. And so if you want a business to be successful, people have to be really able to show up as themselves ultimately and enjoy the success.
And let's not sort of like beat about the bush here. The fact of the matter is, even in the corporate world, there are measures, and it varies from organization to organization, of what success is. If somebody doesn't have any kind of internal yardstick themselves, then they're immediately going to fall into that success is the corner office on this particular floor with this title under the name and this salary with these bonuses. That is success. And the terrible disappointment of life is that you get all that and you're still the same person.
It doesn't work.
And then you hide even more because you feel like an imposter.
Terrified of being found out.
Which is what happens all the time. And it's ridiculously affirming to listen to what you just said, Carrie, because our whole presentation about inclusion being a feeling, we say even if you're the most pragmatic person that has no social interest in this conversation, you don't see it from a consciousness point of view, even if you're just bottom line pragmatic, if you want people to do their best work, they have to be able to be their best self. So no one can be their best self unless they're their authentic self. That's just not possible. And how can I be my authentic self in an environment where I don't feel I belong? And how can I belong in an environment where I don't feel trusted? How can I belong in an environment and be my best self if I don't feel psychologically safe? And how do I feel psychologically safe somewhere I don't feel valued for who I am? And how can I do my best self, be my best self, if I don't feel respected for who I am? So there's a lot of complicated stuff that's going on here. And I think, so for us, I love the hook around belonging. And I think the interesting thing we're talking about here is that for us, we talk about the notion of the distinction between fitting in, which is always an editing problem, versus fitting together, which is an exciting idea. So we think that if you ask someone to fit in what you're saying, we say it very innocuously, don't you? Hey, fitting in, and we say it in a really sweet way. But what we're not really understanding is that's a very freighted statement, because we're asking, how much of yourself did you have to edit to get in here? And time and again, I never weary of, but it's true, right? And I never weary of telling the pretty woman story, because I always think of that story when we have this conversation, where you know that in the opening scene, one of the early scenes, Richard Gere's character meets Julie Roberts' character, and he says to her, of course we know what the transaction's about, right? But he says, my name's Edward, what's yours? And her answer is just absolutely brilliant. She says, well, what do you want it to be? And I think what's happening is day after day after day, because I want to belong, because I want to be accepted, because I want to succeed, because I want the corner office, because I want whatever advancement it is. When you ask me a question, you ask me, what do I think? My answer's going to be, well, David and Carrie are famous and I want to be accepted by them. I want to be their friends. What would you like the answer to be? And
I think some of this is also to do with something David and I teach on a lot is with our leaders is sitting with discomfort. I'm comfortable with your discomfort.
But that's an interesting.
I'm really comfortable with you being uncomfortable. And until I get comfortable with your discomfort, I will always be a people pleaser.
Absolutely.
I will always be what you need me to be until I can sit with, okay, you're uncomfortable with me and I'm totally okay with that. And I'm prepared to walk the miles with you to get comfortable with me, because it might take a while. That's fine. I've got the patience for that.
But let's talk about that, right? Can we?
Because also, I mean, that point. I mean, everything you said so far, Carrie, I've just gone download. I'm like goosebumps. I'm like, yeah, I've got that. I banked that. Wow. You know, so with David, some of the stuff you're saying, Carrie, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to pick into this yet, because I'm processing it, and it's amazing what you're talking about. But I think that what you just said there about being comfortable with the discomfort or the uncomfortability in somebody else is so counter to the culture that we have created for
yes.
ourselves now.
Yes.
And it removes this ability to just be at peace with one another. It's removed curiosity.
Yes.
We can't be curious anymore because we just have to be right and we just have to agree. And it's all of, it's tricky because then it doesn't allow for that.
Doesn't allow for growth. How are you
All
growth?
that diversity
Yeah.
of thought.
And progress.
Difference, yeah.
Progress never happens out of being right. Progress happens out of actually doing something and allowing it to be wrong
That's
if
really
it's
nice.
wrong and learning from it. You know, and I think that, as you said, when it all becomes about being right and people are fearful of making mistakes, there is never innovation, because innovation means doing something different. So you always go back to what you know and what you know works and stagnate.
Yeah,
And in that environment, the individual isn't allowed to be individual, or there's no value of being individual. What there is we have a structure, we have a way, a path, a methodology that has worked in the past. So let's just keep on doing this until the day it stops working.
I mean, that was the way that leadership was done for so many years, was the hero leader. You know, the dominant, charismatic hero leader. Now that's changed. You can be a shy leader and be absolutely, you know, knocking it out of the park with your talent and be shy.
For sure.
You know, pressure's off.
For sure.
I'm really excited about where leadership is right now. I feel like it's because it's much more asset based rather than character, you know, personality based. There's so much more scope for an exciting kind of what teams are you going to make with that? Because it's not all just cookie cutter.
Yeah,
it's really diverse.
And also good leadership now, I believe, realizes that unity is never forged by uniformity.
Oh my gosh.
They are
sure.
entirely
For sure.
different.
For sure, for sure. Carrie, can I take you back to this point you made about sitting with your discomfort? I think that's a really interesting place to go to, because I'm intrigued by the idea of sitting with the discomfort, because I think that requires one to be personally present. So I have to be present and clean to be able to, I have to be able to deal with my stuff in order to hold you in your stuff, right? That seems to me to be right. One of the things that we hear a lot when we're starting to work in our space with leaders is around the notion of how they deal with difference in the workplace.
Yeah.
So, and there are certain aspects of diversity that are concealable, some that are invisible, and some that are not concealable, so, you know, whatever it might be. But what I'm interested in is the discomfort, how we work with people who are in the group that define what it means to belong here, how we deal with difference in that space. So I'm thinking, for example, and I'm very keen to key into your story. So we were talking a little bit earlier about the whole notion of intersectionality, weren't we, before we came on air? And one of the things I'm intrigued about is, how do you help people sit with the discomfort of dealing with your family,
Multiple
let's say?
intersections,
Right.
yeah.
Let's talk about your family.
Yeah. So we have 4 children, 3 birth, 1 adopted, all neurodivergent, 3 trans non-binary in a variety of ways, and on the LGBTQIA spectrum. And mixed race children, and so there's a number of different
this is
things
totting
going
up a
on
little
there.
bit, right?
Yeah, so you know, back in the day when Kimberly Crenshaw,
It's like Subway sandwiches. How much more can you put in?
yeah, when Kimberly Crenshaw first coined the phrase intersectionality, I have to credit her, because obviously it meant one thing at that point, which was, I'm a black woman and I'm going to get knocked down as a woman, I'm going to get knocked down as a black person. So it's that intersectionality. I think what's happened is people have gone, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. There's these other intersections as well. So I think when trying to make a way, say for our 21-year-old son, we might go into their workplace and say, right, I hope it's okay to meet with you because the son's autistic, and people are like, okay, yeah, I can deal with that. Oh, the other thing is that they're trans, so their pronouns are he, him, and then, and actually when they go to the makeup department, someone needs to know how to do afro hair. So then you're asking for I feel like I'm going in and I've got like such a big list of things that when it was just one thing, it felt like I've learned how to do the one thing, then it's another thing, or, you know, and
People think you're a corporate recruiter trying to create jobs for people.
yeah. So And I'm uncomfortable, but this doesn't stop me doing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know, because I know this is going to be problematic for people, but I can't not say. So those things, I think that intersectionality is sometimes uncomfortable for people, but how are we going to progress unless we sit with discomfort? So there might be some things, like I know with the company that Tylen works for at Hollyoaks, they were brilliant. They sent all their staff, before Tylen even arrived on set, sent them all for 2 days autism training.
Wow.
Now, just to give you some perspective on that is more autism training than any teacher that had ever taught Tylen in his whole school career.
That's extraordinary.
Wow.
That's extraordinary.
So a lighting riggers had more autism training than any teacher that taught my child. So some of it is just training. And I know when Ty first came out as non-binary, it was like, okay, right, I'm just going to have to explain to people the they them thing. And there was 2 or 3 really simple things that just made it really easy. Even though people didn't always get it right. That's
People
okay.
get it wrong.
Move on. But just there are certain things that I think they seem more scary than they actually are.
Yeah.
And I think that's, after a while, life is so complex, people are so complex, that it becomes really exciting. To me, it's exciting to know who somebody is with all their multiple layers and which bits matter at what points to them, and ultimately what I love about working with people is they just become their name. Ultimately, they just become their name.
They don't become this person, that person, the black person, the woman, the autistic person, or whatever they become.
That doesn't mean we're not going on the All Lives Matter tip with that, but there does come a point where once you really understand someone, you're like, I get you. I get your autistic self, or I get your ADHD self. That now I get that.
Or I get that when you're disappearing, you're not going on a coffee break. You're going because you're going to pray 3 times a day.
Yeah,
So you're going off to that little room there that we've provided because, hey, why shouldn't we?
Yeah.
But it's so interesting though, because when you say that they're just their name, I didn't think you were going there. I was going to somewhere else with you, which was thinking to myself, it's fascinating, isn't it, how often we lead with people's perceived stigma.
Yeah.
So you become
completely
the autistic
so-and-so,
or the disabled person, or the black person, or whatever else. It's very interesting.
I don't know about you, but I watch people. When I first met David, I used to watch white people do that with him. I would watch them kind of go, hi. And then we know that at some point in the conversation, it's going to get round to the fact that David's black. We're going to have that conversation
talk about it?
in every conversation we have with any white person, including me to begin with. I was the same. So
and we know that every time we're going to go, what?
Thank you for letting me know. I wondered why it was.
And you know what? You're not the first person to say that.
I used to say to David, does that not totally exhaust you, having to give a reason for your existence every day of your life? Do you know what? Google is free.
Yeah, really. What do you do with the awkward advocate, though? What do you do with the person that actually is anxious because we are now living in this kind of, I'm going to play this out for you, but in this woke society of ours, whereas I kind of want to say the right thing, but I don't really know what to do. And if I say this, am I going to get in trouble? And will HR be on?
I love people like you. You're great. People like you, I love. People that get it, whether they get it instinctively or have learnt it, I love you people. People that go, I don't know how to do it, but I really want to get it right, I love you.
Yeah, I agree.
The people that are the problem are the people that think they know it and don't. That's the issue.
What do they look like?
Because you've got to deconstruct. You've got to deconstruct whatever ideas they've got.
How do they show up, those people?
Because they think they know autism, or they think they know,
Can you tell me what that looks like? Because I'm fascinated. What does that look like?
Okay. So does your child speak?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh. Does your child make eye contact? I just met your child. They make eye contact.
Are you sure they're autistic?
But this
is
into,
really...
this goes into
do they really need that adjustment? Do they really need a room on their own during lunch hour? Do they really need that?
Oh, wow.
This moves into the microaggressions piece because...
not so micro.
Right? Because
we've got an autistic person in the company. They don't need a room.
Yeah, that's
Why do you need a room? So it's those kinds of assumptions.
And there's a saying that I think, actually, I first heard it with regard to autism, but I think that as we're talking about intersectionality and we're talking about microaggressions in a minute, it applies to everything, which is if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Yeah.
You know, if you've...
Well, actually, to your point, if you've met one autistic person, you've just met John.
Yes. Yes.
But that's
Right?
not the reality, is
And
it?
that's not
Yeah.
the reality of everybody. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think that we discuss this sometimes laughingly, but the truth is, in almost every society, if you are in a minority, whatever that minority is, or considered to be in a minority of power even, you know, if there's a power discrepancy, then whatever minority you are in, you are supposed to be representative of the whole.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and therefore you go something happens somewhere and someone says, you know, and we asked the head of the board of British Muslims to explain this to us, and someone will say, well, he didn't apologize on behalf of Muslims. So I hold them. So this man is now expected to apologize on behalf of 2.75 billion people around the world. You know, this black person who did this heinous crime is now expected to be representative of all black people. But of course, these sort of weights and measurements are never applied to whatever the principle or the majority of, in anything. So if you've got an organization where it's almost all men in power, then a woman who gains power or gains a seat in the boardroom or gains it becomes the head honcho is suddenly the example of whether a woman can do it.
But
not
also,
the example of whether that person can do it.
Yeah.
But that,
And it's a pressure that would never be applied to a man. It would never be applied to the majority, whatever the majority is. So you've got a black leader. You know, can black people do this? I don't know. Can this person do it?
well,
You know?
without getting unduly political, I wonder when the next time we'll have a black chancellor might be.
Yes, because of
we had one for 5 minutes.
we tried that once and it crashed the economy.
But there is something about that, though, isn't it?
Completely, yes.
There is something about that.
And I think that for me, part of this whole thing of not just intersectionality, but the equality of opportunity and the equality of recognition means that we must learn to recognize people as individuals and not as representatives of a group.
But you see, David, this is where I think it becomes very interesting in the kind of speed of everyday life, because the reality is that what we're talking about now is how we stereotype people. And stereotyping is a convenience that a contrivance, a convenience that we've come to for a group of people that live in a permanent state of partial inattention. So we're very lazy and we just go black, white, male, female, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So you can't be anything more complicated than that, because I don't have the time for that, because I'm processing too much data.
Yes.
And what's interesting about the notion of being stereotyped is it's a fascinating, you know this, I'm sure, it's a fascinating word that comes from this French word, which is a printing word. And it means that once something's printed, it's fixed. So now I've got
It's like the block that you print
printing
everything
block.
else
That's
from.
exactly where they get it from. And so it's a fixed, unchangeable impression. So now I know what black people are like because I've met David. I know what non-binary people are like because I've met whatever, you know, and so it goes on. And it's fascinating because then what you do is you apply that stereotype to the entire group. So now it starts to become very complicated because, to your point, Carrie, if you then start now saying, yes, well, interestingly, if we were to have the conversation in the room, none of us are a single characteristic, are we? We're not one attribute, because we are all at the intersection of different aspects of who we are. And it's a really interesting problem. And I liked where you started originally about gender, because I think what you would have to say, the history books will have to tell us that when we think about gender diversity, what that has fundamentally meant, and I say this with respect, is it's meant the advancement of white women. Gender diversity has not meant the advancement of black women. That's not happened.
Absolutely right.
That's not happened. But we're doing gender. Yes, I understand that. But
I mean, we also haven't talked about, socioeconomic.
well, there's a
That's
whole
a
nother
huge
conversation. There's a whole nother
And that goes
conversation.
right back into that accent piece.
Completely.
Exactly,
really does.
Yeah.
Completely.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's very rarely that. Well, it's not even that it's rare. Sometimes it is considered a disadvantage and a surprise if somebody from a working class background who's very successful, particularly in the world of business, still sounds like they did when they walked through the door.
Yeah, but there's a whole another problem about that, because if you come from, particularly if you're in the elite occupations, if you come from an underrepresented group, there is a real moment that you're going to discover where you have to make a choice, or we have to recognize that you can't go back.
No.
And that becomes really problematic. You live in this kind of...
It's isolating.
It's a bizarre...
Where do you belong?
Where
It's
you don't-
belonging
and that's
again.
a belonging
That's
point. That's a belonging point. You've got a book coming out fairly soon, I think. We're in the midst of vocal training, running this. I don't know how you people run the time, but you've got a book coming out, which I just wanted to talk about, because I wanted to understand. You were very... you're ruthlessly honest people. But one of the things I think you've been honest about, particularly in the press, is not only holding other people in their discomfort, but actually you've had to live with your own, right? You've had to make some interesting adjustments as I mean, we've known you for a very long time, right? So I've seen the story emerge. Tell us a little bit about what the book's about, what we can expect to read, what made you write it?
We wrote it because I think we wanted to have a record of everything that our family had been through that was really difficult and really incredible. And so the book is called A Very Modern Family, and it really is about all the intersections that are represented in our home. And I think it's really to just put it out there and just go, here we are, this is our family, aren't they incredible?
They certainly are.
They're wow, they're totally wow.
Amazing. They're amazing.
And maybe it will get people to feel a little less uncomfortable because they can read it in their own time and go, oh, I've got all these, I'm curious about what it's like. You know, what was it like when Carrie and David met, and she talks about growing up, you know, being brought up racist. You know, I want to have a look at that, and maybe people can own their own attitudes then. Or we look at, you know, when our children came out as trans and how we responded to that in all the different ways, or when we found out they were autistic. You know, all of the responses that we've had, and they're largely been positive, but some of them have been like a bit confused. And we've had to work through that. And that's okay to work through that. We're saying it's okay to work through it. Let's just give people the space and time to work through it.
Absolutely.
So that really, this book is to help people. It's not really a to-do book, because we're not really very preachy people.
Tips and advice.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we spoke about earlier
really.
is this drive and this need to be right. And I have to say that all the tips and advice that we have ever gleaned from our experiences have come from initially being wrong and making mistakes.
Learning to shapeshift.
You know, the only difference between a wise person and a fool is that a wise person probably makes more mistakes but learns from them.
Yeah, that's the truth. Can I ask you a question? Just, he says stereotypically, about to ask you a question. You're not a millennial, are you? You're not a millennial. Are you? Here's my point. Coming from my generation, which I know that you do, have you had any kind of had to put a generational lens on this? Have you been thinking about how does a baby boomer come from the generation we come from, where things were, as you rightly received in a particular way? Have you had to work any stuff out through reflecting through your generation as you've engaged with this conversation in your own family, or is it just, oh yeah, okay, I'm good?
No, I've had to work so much out. I have had to work so much out. You know, there's 9 years difference between Carrie, and I think that showed probably more in how we adapted to the realities of our family and the needs of our family than almost anything else. We're so alike, and yet I grew up, I think, with absolute, this is how you raise a child.
This is what I'm asking.
This is what good behavior looks like. This is what normal, politeness sounds like. This is normal. And I sometimes say, to be honest, I knew 3 cast iron facts about parenting, and they were all wrong.
Isn't that interesting?
What were
They were that children, good, well-behaved children are a credit to you. You take them out, they sit in a restaurant and people look and go, I want my kids
They
to
don't
look
embarrass
like
you in public.
They never embarrass you. Children should not talk back. Your word is final. You know, like the because I say so should be a good enough answer to any question. And thirdly, like respect comes along with a kind of silence. It's like,
how's that working?
Sorry, Dad. It never worked. From day one, It never
It's been a steep
worked.
learning curve for Mr. Grant.
But it had been a really steep, and that really is a generational thing. But what
Yeah.
it's taught me is beyond precious, because what it's taught me is
Wonderful.
this, and these things that parenting have taught me, I can take into life generally, into the wider world. People are individual. Because somebody is an amalgam of yours and somebody else's DNA doesn't mean they're remotely like you. You have to discover who they are and love them for who they are, and encourage them to become more of who they are, and embolden them to be everything they are. So I've learned that, and that applies right across the board. Another thing I've learned is that circumstances alter cases. What's right for one person in the house is wrong for another person in the house. There's no blanket one size fits all. You know, the phrase you used earlier, are you fitting in? Just made me think of the difference between going to a shop and picking up a jacket that has the size that is your size, but some shops it's slightly smaller, some shops it's slightly bigger, but it's the same size. So you have to try it on and
Yeah,
go,
that's
does it
a
work?
great example.
Or having somebody measure you and make it for you. We have taken your measurement and we have adjusted the fabric to fit you.
So we're raising 4 children in 4 different ways.
We're raising 4 children in 4 different ways.
But that's such an important point, right? Because you're raising 4 children, 3 of whom share your DNA, right? Which is your point. And yet you're having to hyper-personalize the way that you raise each of them.
It's not that difficult.
Well,
I think we make out like it's rocket science.
No, but
It's
I
not
agree.
that difficult.
But here's what I want to say though, because I don't think it's that difficult, but I tell you why it's not that difficult for you. It's not that difficult for you because it's driven through love.
Yeah.
But let me come back. Here's my point I was going to make, which was if it's the case that 4 members of a family all needed to be treated equally well, because the whole point about inclusion isn't about treating everyone. It's not same treatment. It's about equal treatment.
Equal treatment,
right?
which is different.
Which
for
is
some
different.
people, yeah.
If that's true for a family with 4, what happens if I'm leading an organisation with 20,000 people in it who are not related? They just happen to coincidentally work in the same space. So you would have to, therefore, wouldn't you, hyper-personalise the experience for every single one of those people as well, because they can't be treated the same. They have to be treated equally well.
Yeah, 100%.
Can I just jump in here? Sorry. I think if you're leading an organisation with 20,000 people,
You're
then-
really lucky.
then you're really lucky. But
You did good.
But-
You did great.
but I think that there is a genuine sort of unconscious bias towards people who are like us.
Affinity bias is called.
Affinity bias. And, you know, we pick people who look like us, sound like us, share our values. But if our values are to give value, and if our objective is to enable people to become everything they can be, then we can't do that with 20,000 people on our own. So you choose your leaders who share those objectives. You choose them not just on ability, although ability clearly has to be high, but on character and on the value that they give, the values that they have and the value that they give to people. If you have a conflict between, you know, the bottom rung of the ladder and making those people feel that they're worth what they're doing, and the bottom line of the organization, which means steamrollering those people, you choose people who value the bottom rung more than the bottom line. Because the bottom line, if you value everybody up the ladder, takes care of itself.
So good.
Or maybe we just dismantle the ladder.
Oh,
you
maybe
know.
we do that.
And I think for those of us that
Maybe we do that.
are born outside the box, it's a lot easier to see that. That creative thinking is imagination is like, yeah, we can think like that. That's why does it have to be in the box? The box doesn't really make a lot of sense to people that are outside the box. And I think that's where our people that are different can be so valuable in companies, because they bring that out of the box for whatever reason. You know, that can be a neurodivergence, but equally, you 3 are all outside the box for various different reasons. And so what you bring is really precious. That's why you're doing great work, because you get it. And so that to me is, they're the people you need to be looking at to employ, is the people that are different. Those should be like top assets.
Completely. What I love about your family is it's What box?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The funk into dysfunctional.
What box?
Yeah.
The funk into dysfunctional. I love it.
I really want to lean into this microaggressions piece just a little bit more, because I know when we think about microaggressions, we tend to think about race, which is, it's a good way in, but actually, anybody can be on the receiving end of a microaggression. And, when you were talking before about, when they met your child who, is on the autistic spectrum, neurodivergent, it was, they actually speak.
Yeah, they speak like it's shocking.
That's, we could take that a few ways, but that definitely would come under the category of...
Yeah, and I think sometimes people mean well if they say, oh, you don't look autistic.
Exactly.
Almost as though that's so good that you're able to pass.
Yeah.
Like, why shouldn't my child look autistic,
What does that mean?
What does
What
that
does it
even
even
mean?
mean?
Yeah. And I think the other one I noticed, certainly with the trans non-binary side of things, gender issues, is that people will find their respect when they're talking, if this was you and I'm saying they, them, and then you move out the room and I say, oh yeah, she does that, doesn't she? And so there's a kind of disrespect. That for me would be a microaggression. So I'm prepared to show you respect to your face and use the right pronouns, but the minute you're out, I'm going to use the pronouns that I think you should. I think you should have that.
Wow.
That's what I think.
I'm not comfortable with you being you, so when you're not here, I'll talk about you the way I'm comfortable.
Oh my God.
And when you're here, I'll talk about you the way you're comfortable.
That's really disingenuous, isn't it?
Oh, yes, but it happens a lot.
And you hear this other one as well, I know is really grating, to someone who's neurodivergent. That's a superpower.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's like
Yeah.
autism is a superpower. All black people can dance. Women have intuition. They just know
It's
things.
the tropes, isn't it?
It's
the
all
tropes.
the tropes that make... And it's interesting, those tropes are adhered to by people who aren't those things. It's like, I know about you, you are a woman and therefore you have intuition. I know about you, you are a black man, so if I put on a piece of music, you're going to be wicked. And I'll stand and watch. I know about you because you're autistic and therefore I can say, what day of the week was it on the 3rd of June, 1936? And you'll know. Yeah. It's just... let's try and get out of this and get back again to the person. Because if we're looking at the person, if we're regarding the person, curious about the person, and wanting to actually discover everything that they are and all their characteristics and see what it is about them where we connect, then we're not going to rely on tropes.
Nice.
Really, I think microaggression is all that stuff that needs to stay in your head, not come out your mouth, stay on your head and get resolved on your own, in your own time.
Yeah, you're so right.
It needs work, but just do it on your own time.
It's lovely. It's a lovely point, isn't it?
So when you go, you're not supposed to say that bit out loud.
Because I'm not saying you shouldn't, not that you shouldn't have those thoughts, but I'm not saying that those thoughts are things that aren't natural to you because of the way you've been brought up. The way we've all got upbringing, we've all got how normal looks. And so when it's outside of normal, it might make us feel like certain things, but keep it to yourself and work it out. That's okay. Do the journey, put the hard work in, and then you don't need to make people feel uncomfortable.
And can I just say, for anybody listening to this, just thinking, but that's not honest. Sometimes people will display their microaggressions, say, I was only being honest, as their kind of get out. Being honest means that everything you say has to be true. It doesn't mean that everything that's true has to be said.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
That's not honesty. Yeah. That's tactlessness.
That's the truth.
Wow. Gosh, again, downloading a lot here, which is great. One final question for you. What advice would you give to your younger selves? What's the one thing you would take in terms of...
This is a good one. How do you
know it comes so much.
Change.
Yeah.
One word. I don't know. You go first. I can't think.
I would say embrace change to my younger self. I would say don't be fearful about making mistakes because that's the only way you're ever going to learn anything. Nice. I was terrified of making mistakes. I would say if you find yourself and you live as yourself, your people will find you.
That's lovely.
And I would finally say, don't worry about growing old because you're only really old at the point that you spend more time looking backwards than you do looking forwards.
Oh, he's so wise. I'm just going to sound really trite now. I think I would just tell my younger self, you're lovely. You're actually
That's
lovely.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that now, but I didn't know that till I was 40.
Really?
Yeah.
It's
To
brilliant.
I really like myself, and I'm okay to say that. But I don't think I really knew that when I was younger.
It's powerful, isn't it?
That's really powerful. I was thinking about how many photos I look at and think, I looked great. At the time, I thought I looked terrible.
I'm starting to have that. I think that's because I'm getting older as well.
But it's only with the
Oh my
benefit
gosh.
of hindsight you
Yeah.
realise, actually, you know, let me embody this moment. Let's stop judging this moment. Let's just
Yeah.
live it. And not live it retrospectively and go, oh, that was a great moment. Let's live it in the moment.
Wow. What a privilege.
Yeah.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you so much.
Thanks for the
very
chat.
much.
You guys
It's
asked deep
great.
questions.
I'm telling you. So deep I drowned.
You just kept
I
your head
survived,
above the
yeah.
water.
Made it to the surface in the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great.
What an honour.
Thanks.
Excited about the book. When's the book come out?
Don't know. May. Chantal knew.
date?
11th.
I had my notes. I think I'm going
Is it
to
11th
refer
or 14th?
back. Well, I'm going to refer back to my notes. So just give me 1 second because I didn't have it banked. 11th of May.
Wonderful.
Oh, our book's out on the 11th of May.
Good.
And it's called A Very Modern Family.
Fantastic.